Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of On the Legal Side, a production of Private Officer International. Here we discuss the law, liabilities, the risk factor for both the private individual and businesses. Today we're doing a refresher on a subject that we have brought forth several times over the past 18 or so years. A subject that oftentimes people are not comfortable discussing, and understandably so, but nevertheless, a subject that must be discussed. I'm talking about having your life in order for that final event, that final day of life. We're talking today about the necessary tools, the ducks in the row that must be in place so that your loved ones can follow through with your wishes. With the high number of COVID deaths and officers being killed in the line of duty, these things are a necessity. I know we all want to delay them and not talk about them, not really have to sit down and start talking about, well, the end of life and how soon that could be. But for those of you who are married or have children, those of you who might be older, although, like a fine wine that's been aged, people do get better in many different areas. There's just no way to stop the progression of your, what a friend of mine would call, expiration date. So today I want to go over a couple of things here on the legal side so that you understand what each means and the necessity for you to have them now. Oh, I'm going to wait until I develop cancer and I'm on my last breath. Oh, I'm going to wait until I'm 70 to begin looking at putting these things in order. No man is guaranteed any amount of life, and I always recommend that this is something that you do as soon as you become an adult. I want to explain, first of all, that it is very important to have some type of life insurance, different than medical health insurance. Life insurance, you have term and you have whole life. What is that difference? Many people do not have a true or complete understanding, if at all. Term insurance is that type of life insurance that is much cheaper to buy because it has a term, an amount of time, a period of time connected to that policy. And if the insured dies during that time period specified within the policy, and that policy is active, that it is enforced, and that the premium, the monthly payment, has been made during that time period when a death occurs, the amount of that insurance policy will be paid. So right now you can get some very inexpensive insurance policies. If you're trying, and this is a key to determining what type of insurance, life insurance, that you should buy or you need, If you're trying to fund your children's college fund after your passing, or provide your spouse with a buffer of finances to be able to pay the mortgage and sustain their daily life after you've gone from this world for a period of time, then you're looking at whole life. Whole life is different. Whole life will pay out like an investment, and term life will pay out a specific amount. Whole life gathers interest and other things, and it's a little bit more complicated. Term life is what you would want to buy if you're trying to pay for all associated funeral costs and also give your family a little bit of cushion financially after you've departed this world. Right now, you can buy term life relatively inexpensive. $25,000 policy will more than cover any funeral service and all the things that go with it, and maybe even leave a few thousand behind for the family. It is inexpensive to buy right now, and many times there's no physical needed. You can buy term life, $25,000 or $50,000 for about $30 or $40 a month. And while that might be a large amount for some folks, in the end, you're going to be reassuring that not only the funeral cost and maybe some of the debt is paid, but also help with giving a cushion to the spouse of the family that you might leave behind. Now, if you're single, you don't have a wife, and your children are grown, and you don't want to leave them any money, or any of your exes any money, as George Strait would say, all my exes are in Texas, and that's why I live in Tennessee. But if you don't want to leave behind any cash whatsoever, but you do want to take care of either a burial or a cremation for yourself, then $25,000 policy will more than cover that. In fact, $10,000 these days will cover a minimal burial or a cremation, and so you might get that. Well, here's another issue we're going to have. Let's say that you are single and you don't have any grown children, or you're not on good terms with the grown children or with the exes. Who's going to disseminate these funds? You can make a friend or even a funeral home the power of attorney, which we're going to get into here next. But you can also prepay for those funeral arrangements and have everything organized so when that time comes that the funeral home will take care of it. Term insurance is much less expensive than permanent life insurance or whole life insurance, things that you don't necessarily need unless you're young and you're trying to build a little bit of a investment. Unlike most types of permanent insurance, term insurance really, it has no cash value until you are deceased. And as long as you're paying those premiums, then you're good to go. Well, what happens if you have a 20-year term insurance policy and those 20 years are up? You live beyond that time period. You have to renew that policy. So just like your car insurance, you have to renew it every year. You might not use that car insurance and you paid, let's say your premium is $1,400 a year. Well, you do lose those premiums. And then you renew your insurance and you start over. Well, the same goes for term insurance. Term insurance is basically to give you that payment, or your family that payment, for funeral expenses, and to make sure that all associated costs are covered. You can get a 20 or 30-year policy, you can get a 10-year policy. Just like the coverage on your vehicle, the premium, the monthly payment will depend on the coverage that you're getting. We're not going to talk about today whole life or permanent life and how these differ, because really in this day and age when really we don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next, we really just want you to be prepared for sudden death. Unfortunately, with COVID, with the millions of people who are being affected by COVID, the hundreds of thousands, now close to 1 million people have died from COVID, even associated with or related to. And every year, thousands, tens of thousands die from simple flu. Obviously, if you are working in law enforcement, private security, public safety, you're a firefighter, or you do a cross spectrum of first responder work like I do, we don't know. We are in the higher risk category, the more dangerous category. We don't know what might happen from day to day. So having a little life insurance definitely is key. I know that in my own life, when my parents passed, they believed in insurance, couldn't really afford it, always made a way to afford it, and it helped us when their time came to be able to afford all of the associated costs. If you're married, I would recommend that today or tomorrow, definitely don't wait longer than a few days, that you would sit down and you would talk with the family if you don't already have insurance, or if you do, maybe up it a little bit. If you have a $25,000 policy, maybe up it to $50,000. The premiums are going to probably double, but in the end, it will be worth it to the family. I want to talk a moment about savings accounts, checking accounts, access to your credit cards. Once you pass, if your wife or a secondary person is not on the account, they will not have access to your savings, to your credit cards, to your checking account. I know that many married families these days don't have joint accounts. Everyone seems to be independent of each other, even in a marriage. I don't know. I guess I'm a little old-fashioned, but, back in the day, when you got married, you took each other's accounts. You were one, not two, and you were on all of the bills, all of the savings and checkings accounts, life insurance, credit cards, so on and so forth. These days, it's not like that. In fact, in many cases, wives don't take the name of the husband, and if they do, it's hyphenated or something of that nature. It is important that we prepare for might come. It's inevitable, death is, and if we're not fully prepared after we're gone, your family is going to have a hard row to hoe, a hard time trying to get access to accounts where their names are not on it. Make sure that if you have savings accounts, that both your names are on it. If something should happen to her, then you will also have access to those accounts. It's okay to have a single checking account for, little things that we buy as an individual. Maybe you buy guns, or you buy tools, or you monkey around with fixing cars, and so this is your little spending money. That's fine, but the main accounts will need to have both parties' names on it in order to access. Now, there is one other way that you can access the accounts and be included, and we'll talk about that when we come back from the first break. But before we go on that break, I do want to mention one other thing. If you are jointly on the credit cards, the home loan, the auto loan, then when one or the other passes, obviously the remaining person would be legally responsible for those bills and for the remaining balances on those accounts. So that is one thing to consider. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about something called a POA. You're listening to POI, the Private Officer International Association Radio, and we're coming right back here on the legal side.
Who knows what a child will grow up to be? It's one of the coolest things about kids. The unknown, the potential, the chance to do or become whatever they can imagine. But what if something happens during childhood that stops them from reaching that potential? Did you know that preventable injuries are the #1 killer of children in the United States? And around the world, one child dies from a preventable injury every 30 seconds. But the important thing to remember about preventable injuries is that they're preventable. We can do something to stop them. Things to make sure kids get the chance to be creative and play. The chance to take chances and explore. The chance to fall down and get back up. Help us give your kids, and every kid, the chance to grow up, reach their potential, and become whatever they can imagine. Learn how at safekids.org.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining me here on the legal side. As we're talking about a topic, a subject that really is not comfortable for many folks. It is, unfortunately, a fact of life that life is not forever. And today we're talking about having everything in place so that your loved one who's left behind will have access to all of the areas of your joint life that they need. As we went to our first break, we talked about a POA, and that is simply a power of attorney or a notarized letter of attorney, which is an authorization that gives that other person the authority to represent you on your behalf in all the decisions that must be made. And there's a secondary aspect to that POA that you also need to have, and that is the medical power of attorney. So let's discuss the two different parts of a power of attorney or a letter of attorney. It's basically just that. It's a written authorization from you giving the power to a secondary person to act on your behalf in your good faith. It allows them to take part and take care of your private affairs. If you want them to conduct your funeral in any certain way, then they would carry those steps out. If they want, you want them to distribute your funds, your bank account money and so forth, they would do that as well. Having the power of attorney is necessary unless you're a married couple. If you're not a married couple, this is a thing that you're going to need. But if you are a married couple or the mother of the child that is not an adult, you automatically have the authority to represent that person on their behalf. However, many people these days live together for many years. Some people call themselves married, and they act married in more ways than one, even though they are not legally married on paper. And many folks these days call their relationship a common law marriage, and in some jurisdictions that does apply. But in order to be a true agent and to act as the POA, you need that document. And besides being just a written document, and it can be very simple, it could just, be 3 or 4 lines as long as the step, goes through the steps of what that person wants after they're gone. But besides being a written document, it should be notarized or witnessed. This instrument, once signed, dictates everything that person wants done when they are no longer with us. It passes their power over to a secondary person. They can distribute the funds. They can pay off the car if that's what the man or woman wants. They can sell the house, the condominium, or not, depending on what that person stipulated in their power of attorney. The second part of a POA is the authority to act on behalf of that person during medical situations if they're not able to make their own decision. When a person is terminally ill, especially, or in hospice, they're not able to make any decisions. Oftentimes, they're not able to speak or to even communicate. And therefore, these things really have to be in place long before that time comes. And like I said, we never know when that time will come. So having this power of attorney in place will allow the designated person to act on behalf of that dying or dead person. And during a medical crisis, it allows them to make the best decisions possible for that person. With a power of attorney gives you the ability to know that when you have passed away, that someone is carrying out those steps as you would want them to. Without this legal, notarized, or witness document, what's going to happen is that the probate court, the court in your jurisdiction, will take over on your behalf. That's the law. Your family cannot step in and make decisions for you. Your daughter, your sister, your brother, your cousin, or your living girlfriend or boyfriend, they have no legal authority without this power of attorney. The secondary part to a POA is that you make sure that medical POA authority is in there. Oftentimes people will sign a power of attorney, but that includes steps as to what should be done on their behalf in these medical crises, in these medical end-of-life situations where that individual may not be able to make that decision. So it's very important that you get that in place. The next document that we want to talk about, and having been in the EMS profession since 1977 as a paramedic, an EMT, a first responder, a firefighter, it's very important that you have this document not only in place, but that you have multiple copies of it. And that is called a DNR, or Do Not Resuscitate Order. Without this physical document, even if your family is standing there telling the responders, don't do anything. He doesn't want to be resuscitated. He doesn't want CPR. He doesn't want to be on a ventilator. Without that legal, notarized, Do Not Resuscitate order, the emergency responders legally are bound to continue all life support methods. So a Do Not Resuscitate order simply is a medical order that is written by a doctor. It instructs the healthcare providers not to do CPR, not to put them on a ventilator, not to take any life-saving steps at all. Once the patient's heart has stopped beating, once they are clinically deceased, no responder, firefighter, police officer, paramedic, EMT will take any further steps to support life or to attempt to revive that person. There are pros and cons to this. If the person is terminally ill, he has cancer, he has some other terminal disease, and he's suffering or she's suffering, obviously, that's very understandable that they would not want to continue life, especially if they're in a vegetative state. There's no probability that they're going to come back to them being themselves or even have any motor function, brain function that would give them any type of real life. Then understandably, they would not want to suffer any further, and the family would not want them to suffer any further. However, without that true document in front of you, and I've been on these things, these calls, where the family is crying, hysterical, no, they don't want this, we understand that. But the law requires that until we have a physical copy, even if a doctor, a family doctor, is put on the phone, we have to legally continue life support efforts until we have a physical copy of that do not resuscitate order. If we should take a person's word on the scene without that document, and then they cannot find the document, or the document truly is not in place, they thought it was, but it wasn't, then we could face both civil and criminal charges, as well as lose our licenses. It's important that you get this situation in place as soon as possible. Someone could have an accident and be critically injured. Someone could be on a ventilator because of a work-related injury, a gunshot that was sustained merely as just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And unfortunately, it is not an easy decision to make. Of course, if you want your loved one not to suffer, and they're at the end of their life, or they're suffering from an illness that they cannot come back from, this might be something that they would want. It's time for you to have this hard discussion with your loved ones, and that includes your children. They have a word, even if they're a minor. They have words, they have decisions, they have thoughts. What do you want done? We'll do the best we can for you, but we do want your input into this as well. It will be too late once someone is in these situations to make those decisions. It's not going to be easy, and certainly it will be less easy at the time of that end-of-life situation. Having access to a DNR, having access to the person's power of attorney, having access to the person's credit, savings, checkings, especially a spouse, is something that you need to have done immediately and not wait until that person is very, very ill. And on one final note, I want to suggest that each of you have a long, hard talk about donation of organs and skin. When people begin to think about, donating someone's organs after they've been through whatever medical situation, now you want us to cut them open and take out all their organs. That's a hard decision. It's a hard conversation, but it is a necessary one. A lot of good can come out of tragedy in these situations. Right now, it's very easy to become an organ or a skin donor, and all that you have to do is, on your driver's license, there's a box now. Have it checked off. Just like there's a box to vote, well, there's a box to be an organ donor or a skin donor. Many stories across the board, across the country, are out there about the many lives that are saved just by one person donating their skin, their organs. Hey, I don't need them after life. I'm not here. I don't need them. And if they can be used for someone else, why not? This is where selfishness and sometimes religion and other things take a very big part in this discussion. But it is one, like all of these other documents and areas that we've covered today, it is one that needs to be discussed. I want to thank you for being with us on this edition of On the Legal Side. Remember to join us Monday, tomorrow. You know, today is Halloween, and I didn't want to talk about this type of subject on such a date, but join us tomorrow on the Private Officer Beat Radio. Until then, be blessed, be safe, and of course, we'll see you back here on the radio.